Psych Ward Diaries, number 10. I lost a patient last night. We'll call him Bob. He wasn't in his bed or even on my floor. He was behind the gas station across the street. A short, middle-aged, balding man. He used to be obese, but he took to crystal meth and lost all the weight. It left him wearing an ill-fitting skin suit. They found him between two dumpsters at the Chevron. He had overdosed, and someone had come by and stomped on his head until he slipped away. According to the responding officers, he was getting high with someone who decided to rob him of his panhandling money and leave him for dead. These are the types of things that go on around here. Oftentimes, I find my former patients on the evening news for horrendous crimes. One of my patients living with schizophrenia got discharged a few weeks ago. We'll call him Carlos. He would always talk about his lady friend and how much he missed her. He was mentally unwell, but his lady gave him something to focus on, and it seemed kind of romantic. Turns out, he did go see his lady. He also killed her newborn son by putting him in the microwave. He's awaiting trial. And so here I am. It's 7:30 a.m. I'm sitting in the parking lot of my hospital, smoking a joint and trying to process my night. It started with a guy that we'll call Tommy. He's a tall, wiry kid who was so high on meth that he couldn't go to sleep. We gave him enough meds to put down a horse. When we left his room, we thought he'd be incapacitated. A few minutes later, I heard the distinct sounds of bare feet slapping on the ground. I looked up to see that Tommy had come out of his room. He was completely naked, running laps up and down the hallway singing "Eye of the Tiger." He wasn't hurting anybody, and it was pretty entertaining, so I let him go for a minute before he was contained and sent back to his room. Most nights here are manageable, but the real trouble happens in the morning. When I first started this job, one of my coworkers said to me, if something was going to really spark off, it was going to happen at shift change. She wasn't wrong. Every day between 7 and 7:15 a.m., it's like an alarm goes off in the patients' heads and incidents are bound to happen. As the sun rises, some patients wake up screaming. Other patients have been up all night, irritated, fighting their medications and sleep. Today's incident involved the nurse manager. We'll call her Maya. She's a small Filipino lady with a passion for confrontation. This is nothing against Filipino women, but this lady, she yaps like a little chihuahua and is about the size of one. When she feels disrespected by the patients, which is often, she begins shouting in a heavy Filipino accent, "Who do you think you are? You don't tell me what to do." This usually results in the patient slinking away to get help somewhere else. But not today. Today was the day she met Kevin. He's a corn-fed white boy from Alabama. He has blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and stands at about 5'9". He's also built like Mike Tyson. Kevin had been up for hours fighting the voices in his head who told him that he was going to die if he didn't eat. He approached the nurse's station where Maya was working and said, "I need some food. I need to get some food." Maya, who was never keen on doing more work than she has to, ignored him, hoping he would go away. Kevin repeated louder, "I need some food. I need to get some food. I just want some fucking food." Triggered and feeling disrespected, Maya sounded off with her favorite line. "Who do you think you are? You don't tell me what to do." That was the wrong thing to say. Kevin was now repeating his request in a psychotic mantra. "I need some food. I need some fucking food," over and over again. My experience working in the mental health field has made me aware of certain red flags. One of the biggest red flags is when a patient starts repeating themselves over and over again. Internally, they're ramping themselves up for chaos. In a flash, Kevin took his gigantic forearms and cleared off the entire nurses' station. Everything, including papers, charts, and the computer, were splayed across the floor. Maya's eyes grew big as saucers as she stood up from her chair. With the speed and grace of a praying mantis, Kevin grabbed her by the throat, put her up against the wall, and screamed, "Food! I just wanted some fucking food!" Luckily, me and 3 other male nurses were close by and sprang into action. We grabbed him. The other nurses pummeled him until he let her go. Meanwhile, I grabbed his arm and twisted it up behind his back as far as it could go until he calmed down. We lifted him up, walked him back to his room, and threw him on his bed. Maya, having survived the attack, insisted on giving him the B-52 cocktail herself. Although unnecessary, the medication was administered with an 18-gauge needle to his ass with reckless abandon. The agonizing screams that filled the room soon dwindled as he drifted off to sleep. The food tray finally came, but he never did eat that breakfast. When I was a kid, people always thought I had a good chance of ending up in prison. I guess I did in a way. But instead of being an inmate, I was there as a psych nurse. The thing is, you only end up in a psych prison one way, by committing the unthinkable. These people will never see the free world again, and for good reason. I'm reminded of my first day on the job. I was assigned to D Block, and they received their medications at 9 p.m. It was standard to be accompanied by 2 correctional officers, or COs, as I pushed a small cart under the buzzing lights of the corridor. Each cage had a small window and a slot at the bottom for medicine and food. Inside the cell was completely dark. As I approached each door, a CO would bang on the window, alerting them to come forward. Within seconds, a monster would emerge from the shadows to collect their daily cocktail of pills. One guy looked like a werewolf. He had wild hair, crazy eyes, and drooled from the mouth. Another stared at me with the dead eyes of a zombie and only spoke in grunts. And yet another looked completely normal, but he had a wicked smile and a charm that reminded me of Ted Bundy. That first day, I remember thinking, I get why prisons exist. That idea would be reinforced many times over while on this job. One of the worst cases of "this is why prisons exist" happened one night during roll call for Lights Out. The COs go around to each cell to make sure the inmates are present. I was in my office sketching on a notepad when I heard a panicked voice yelling, "Nurse!" come over the radio. I rushed down the corridor and saw a group of officers already gathered outside of a cell. They signaled for me to hurry up and come closer. As I rounded the corner, I looked into the cell and saw what looked like a horror show. There was blood everywhere, on the floor, on the bed, the walls, even on the ceiling. And sitting calmly in the middle of all this chaos, was Jeff. He was a tall, skinny black guy that reminded me of Chris Rock. He was always friendly when I came by to give him his medicine. Little did I know, he had stopped taking his pills for about a week and had been hiding them under his tongue. The day of the incident, he had been in the quiet room where the inmates are allowed to read books. Somehow, he had gotten a hold of a paperclip and slipped it into his pocket. Once he got back to his cell, he retrieved the paperclip, lifted up his shirt, and proceeded to dig into his abdomen with it. He must have been digging for at least 15 minutes between room checks before they found him. That's when I heard the call over the radio and ran down the hallway. In that moment, I found myself staring at Jeff, sitting in a pool of his own blood with a gaping hole in his abdomen. He had cut through several layers of yellow fatty tissue. He then reached in and pulled out half of his beefy red intestines through the hole. According to the officer on duty, Jeff had covered his window with a wet paper towel. When the CO asked if he was okay in there, Jeff responded, "I need a Band-Aid." When the officer inquired as to why, Jeff simply said he had made a little mess, but all he needed was a Band-Aid. That's when the officer opened the door and witnessed the massacre. As I rushed in to stabilize him and cover his wound, I noticed he looked confused. A worried expression washed across his face, as if to say, "What did I do?" It was like he didn't understand why everyone was there and making a fuss. He even began whining like a little boy, saying, "But I don't want to go," when they wheeled him out on the stretcher. I went to the bathroom later to wash my hands and the blood off my clothes. When I looked in the mirror, I had a moment of clarity and said to myself, I really got to go back to school. Hey everybody, this is Creflo and I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please be sure to hit that like button, share, and subscribe. This has been Creflo signing off.